Alright, so the 08 Escalade is in the shop, but this is for preventive maintenance, not actually something wrong with it, because I'm right at about 200,000 miles and I'm on my original springs on the front, and I have changed out the strut, the shock portion of it, but I need to get these changed out again because I've noticed that my suspension is a little bit rough now. And so we're going to get set up here and we're going to check out and see how these Vigor front air struts do, because I got me a set over here and I also got me a set of just the shock portion of the strut, but I got the full set too. We're going to go through how to do both of them because I want to check and see if my spring is still good on my vehicle, the OE one, or if it's time to change that out. So I'll be using my OE spring on the shock portion of the strut for a rebuild, but I'll also be checking out just the full assembly from Vigor here. So let's get set up here, get some tires off, and see if we can't get this thing done. Alright, so in order to check and see if these Vigor front struts are going to do as good as my current ones, and I don't have the OE shock portion of the strut on there anymore, I'm running some KYB heavy duties because I didn't like the mag ride. They were so old and worn out that they were real jittery, so I traded them out years ago for some KYB regulars and just rebuilt the strut. But I want to check and see how these are doing compared to when I install the Vigor. So we're going to go for a little ride with a camera underneath the car and we're going to see just how reactive the suspension is for this. So we'll show that in just a second. I'll show a little clip of it. Then after we do the install, we can compare that side by side on the video and just see if there's any difference. Alright, so before we take our current shocks off that have the factory springs from the struts on them, we're going to run and do a little video and run across some train tracks down here and just see how they react. And then when we put the Vigor ones on, we'll be able to see some differences and I'll also be able to tell if the handling is better. But the video is going to tell us some of the reaction of the spring and whether or not the shocks are reacting about the same, and then I'll be able to know just by the feel. So let's go on down here and we'll find us some train tracks and we'll bounce over them a couple times. Alright, so as far as changing out the struts on the front of this Escalade, and it's like a Tahoe and quite a few others, they use pretty much the same suspension. You got a couple of options. You can either buy the full assembly, like I got right here, comes with the spring and the whole thing. So there's only 5 bolts holding it on. Pretty easy to change out, not a lot of work. You don't have to have any special tools or anything, but it's a little more expensive. Or your other option is to just buy the shock portion of the strut and then you'll use your OE springs and things on it and rebuild it. That way you got a new shock if your shock's gone bad, assuming your springs are good. But in order to do this, I'm going to tell you it's a ton more work because you got to have some spring compressors like these McPherson strut compressors right here. Need to get you a set of them because there's no playing around with this big old spring. But I'll make a video to show how to do this in case you're wanting to go the less expensive route and just buy the inner shock portion of the assembly here. But we're going to get set up, take these other ones off. I'm going to put these on first and then we'll take a video underneath and just see how much difference it makes with my OE spring. Then I'm going to do the final swap out with the full assembly. We'll do another video and we're going to check that out as well. Alright, so let's get set up over here and we're going to get this car up on the lift and get some struts changed out. Alright, so all we got to do is take that top nut loose, but what I'm going to do is put a bar in here just to catch this thing. So I'll raise up on it a little bit, see if I can't get my nut loose. Right there. So we got to take our nut loose on the top. And we'll save him. Now, the whole strut just comes right out of there. So what we want to do is just pull it down, and then we tip it forward, try not to catch anything, and we slide it right out. Now what you heard fall was actually that little nut thing on this side. The other one has a replacement, so we're okay. And there you go. So we got our big old strut out, and you can see these were the KYB gas adjusts, so they weren't the mag ride. So I'm curious how these Vigors are going to do with the mag ride on the top of them like the OEs were. Alright, so with everything bolted back up, we just got to put our little connector back on the top. So we just need to get a little dielectric grease here on our finger, and we're going to put it on top of that to lubricate that little shaft right there. And then we just slip this guy back on here, and there we go. So now we can do our comparison with our OE spring and the new shock portion of the strut from Vigor, and we can see how well they do. So all I got to do is go over there and do the other side, then we'll be ready to go for a ride down the road and get a comparison with the camera underneath. So that'll be coming up next. Alright, so with our regular heavy duty shocks that we had on there swapped out for the new Vigor ones, then we're going to go for our ride again and jump over some train tracks and see what's going on with these with a camera underneath. Then we're going to come back and we're going to do the final comparison with the full strut assembly that Vigor provides. So then we can compare all three and see just how they do. So we'll be back once we go for a ride. Alright, so with the shock portion of the strut on there from Vigor, and I'm using my OE springs, we'll go for a ride and see how it does across the train tracks. But first I wanted to show that there's no codes on the dash, so that's a good thing. It's reading that mag ride suspension setup, so I'm not getting any suspension errors. So let's get set up here and we'll go run across these train tracks again with the camera underneath and see what it looks like. Alright, so I can already tell that the ride is a bit smoother with these new shocks for these struts, because like right there it went over that bump real nice compared to those heavy duty ones that I had on there. They are a little bit harder than these bigger ones, but this is more like the Escalade ride that was original for it with the mag rides, because these have the sensors, and so they're picking up the movement of the shock on the strut and compensating. So it's going to be real interesting to see when we hit these train tracks just how much bounce it has, and does it absorb it quick or does it let it keep bouncing. So that'll be really interesting. So we'll get on down here and we'll run across these train tracks. Alright, so here we are at the train tracks, doing right at the speed limit. So let's see how they do. That didn't feel too bad. Actually was a little bit softer than going with the KYB heavy duties. So we'll turn around and go back and hit them one more time. Alright, so there we go. So now we can look at that in comparison to the heavy duty ones. Now we just got to head back and swap out for the complete Vigor strut assembly that I got and see how it does, because it's got new springs on it, and we'll be able to see if there's any difference between my old OEM springs that are 200,000 miles old and some brand new springs, as well as a brand new strut. Alright, so we got our last one swapped out. I didn't show all that, but there's a video out there on the channel under the Escalade playlist if you want to see how to swap these full assemblies out. It's super simple. You don't have to deal with taking the springs off and all that, but we got her swapped out. So this is the Vigor shock portion of the whole strut with my OE springs, and we just did a video on that. So now we're swapped out to the full Vigor assembly. We'll get the other side done, the wheels back on, and we'll be ready to do our final comparison test ride with the camera underneath so we can see how well the whole Vigor assembly does. Alright, so for the final comparison here, this is the Vigor assembly. This is the full assembly versus just the shock portion. So here we come to our first little bump, and let's see how it does here. That was even smoother because these have the new springs provided by Vigor. Oh, and just a note, there's no codes on the dash for these either, so Vigor did a good job of getting it tuned so that it doesn't throw any kind of suspension code, so that's a good thing. So now we'll run down here and we'll run over our train tracks one more time, and then we can do side-by-side comparisons of how the whole assembly springs back and forth when you hit a big bump, and just how everything reacts. Alright, so here we go over the tracks with the full strut assembly from Vigor installed. Wow, that felt pretty good. It was stable, so I think that might be alright versus having the original springs on there. That actually bounced right over it. So let's turn around and we'll hit it one more time. And back we go. So let's see how well it do. Oh yeah, so that was a lot smoother with the full strut assembly. There we go. Well, I think we're going to keep these on here, and we're going to run these for another 100,000 miles or so and just see how well these bigger ones do. But in comparison by feel, they feel a whole lot better than those heavy duty KYBs I had on there. And no suspension codes, and we're running mag ride, so we're in good shape. So we'll head on back to the house and summarize these videos. Alright, so from the slow-mo videos underneath the vehicle, we can see that suspension on that Escalade gets a pretty good workout. So, it looks like the Vigor ones actually respond quite a bit better to taking the shock on the shock absorber portion. And these are the KYBs, these were heavy duties. So, I mean, they're good shocks. They did pretty good for a heavy duty shock, but it doesn't ride near as smooth with these as it does with the full Vigor strut assembly changeout. So, I think we're going to keep the Vigors on there, and we're going to get rid of these KYBs because they've done their job for the past thousands of miles, and we'll just let these guys go. Well, alrighty. Well, thanks for watching.